Have something here.
Now with Doug Russell, here's Matt Schneidman on the game.
Matt Schneidman Show, Tuesday, November 14th, and that day is important because it's my mother's birthday. So happy birthday, Mother.
Happy birthday, Mrs. Schneidman.
Absolutely. Was enjoying some nice time with her in Pittsburgh and the rest of the family this weekend, as I said on yesterday's show. So that's why I can get away with doing a radio show instead of having a birthday dinner with her back in Connecticut, I guess, tonight, which wouldn't have been possible anyway because I live in Wisconsin. Anyway, I have a new set of headphones because my old pair snapped.
Okay. Looks like you're in a new studio, too.
I'm not.
It's a new microphone. It's a different microphone.
It is a different microphone because the old one kept falling off. So we got some new equipment.
Oh, look at you all fancy.
I'm ready to go. What we're going to talk about first, because we touched on it briefly yesterday, I believe. All these shows blend together, so I don't really remember. I want to tease a little bit of what I have coming tomorrow morning on The Athletic. And by tease, I mean rattle off a couple stats that I think are telling. So we touched on a lot of what went wrong for the Packers and what has been going wrong for the Packers on yesterday's show. One of the things that has not delivered for them over the past month is their $24 million a year edge rusher, and that would be Rashawn Gary. Now, am I saying that Rashawn Gary mailed it in after he got paid? No, absolutely not. I don't think he would ever do that. Anyone you talk to in that building would say Rashawn Gary is the hardest worker in there. And work ethic is such a cliche term that's thrown around so willy-nilly these days. But Rashawn Gary is the embodiment of work ethic more than anyone else. He makes it more than just, a cliche term. But his production hasn't been there. So a couple numbers to chew on from the last month. And I guess before that, too. From weeks 1 to 5, Rashawn Gary ranked second in the NFL in pressure percentage among edge rushers who rush the passer at least 15 times per game. So among guys who regularly rush the passer, he pressured the quarterback at the second highest rate in the NFL. He was on somewhat of a limited snap count. He played anywhere from 16 to 47% of the Packers' defensive snaps the first 5 games as they ramped him back up off that torn ACL. In the last 4 games, among guys who have played at least 3 of those and rushed the passer at least 15 times per game, so in layman's terms, guys who have stayed healthy and consistently rushed the passer over the last month, Gary ranks 30th in percentage of pass rush snaps resulting in a pressure. Over the last 4 games, Rashawn Gary has more face mask penalties than sacks. There are 181 players with at least half a sack over the last month. Rashawn Gary is not one of them. Now, I've spent my entire day today, pretty much, for the listeners and subscribers to The Athletic, watching the All-22 tape of the last 4 games and each one of Rashawn Gary's pass rush snaps because, as I mentioned, after the game on Sunday, I asked him, how often are you feeling you get true one-on-one opportunities anymore? And he said, I don't know, you tell me. And I didn't know, so I kind of froze and didn't answer. But I'm glad I didn't answer because he answered his own question and said, okay, that means I got to be doing my job right. So I went back and looked and saw how many times over the past 4 games Rashawn Gary has been blocked by more than one guy, whether that's a true double team with 2 offensive linemen, whether it's a chip, whether it's a thump, whether it's, kind of layered blocks where they don't block him at the same time, but he gets off one block, then there's another guy there to block him. And I counted 22 times over the last 4 games, and True Media has him rushing the passer 92 times. So that means 70 one-on-one opportunities. Bottom line is he's not producing enough. And Rashawn Gary has played, in the 60s in terms of percentage of defensive snaps in each of the last 4 games. Guys like TJ Watt, Max Crosby, Myles Garrett all play above 80% of their team's defensive snaps. I believe Garrett's at 81, Watt's at 84, and Crosby's at a whopping 98%. Right now, it looks as if Rashawn Gary, and I'm sorry for rambling here, Doug. Right now, it looks as if Rashawn Gary is just more effective when he gets a limited workload and he can't handle the bigger workload. But we know that's not true because in past years, he has produced at an elite level when he gets a full workload. I don't know if it's just coincidence over the last month, if he's just still getting his wind, his feet back under him, coming off a major knee injury last year. But they pay the guy $24 million a year now. They need him to start playing like a guy who makes $24 million a year.
I think that's fair. Absolutely. And, you know, like you said, sometimes there are mitigating circumstances. Sometimes it's something to the effect of, he's got an injury that he's coming back from, which is the case, obviously. Sometimes it's the double teams, like you were talking about before. But yeah, I mean, when you pay a guy that much money, I mean, that's what you expect because the margin of error on this team that's carrying some $57 million worth of dead cap money right now. You want to get production from the guys that you're trying to, bank your season on. And I know you were talking about David Bakhtiari a little bit earlier. I mean, it's an unfortunate injury that happened to him, but they put a lot of money into David Bakhtiari and they're not getting any return on the investment. Sports, it happens sometimes, but Rashawn Gary's a guy who's out there and he's trying to lead this defense. And I think this defense, it's got leaders certainly on it, but you also have to match the leadership with the production at some point.
Right. And as we talked about yesterday, the Packers need their highest paid players to perform. And right now, Gary, Jair Alexander, because of injury, Devondre Campbell, Darnell Savage, who makes, a little less than $10 million this year. Still a lot of money. He's not on the field. Kenny Clark. They need their highest paid players to perform, especially on defense, and they're not doing that. So that's what it comes down to. I just named Gary because that's my story this week. I've never thought he's a great run defender, which obviously needs to improve, but no longer is he, a rising talent in this league. No longer is he on a rookie contract and, this guy's going to get paid big money one day. He's the next big thing. He is tied for the 5th highest paid pass rusher in the National Football League. After Nick Bosa, TJ Watt, I'm going to try and get this in order. Nick Bosa, TJ Watt, Joey Bosa, Myles Garrett, and then I think Rashawn Gary and Max Crosby are the same, or Rashawn Gary's a little bit above Max Crosby and Khalil Mack. Either way, Rashawn Gary's production needs to match his salary. And yes, some of it is him getting more attention, and it's hard to overcome when 2 guys are blocking you on one play. He has done it sometimes, as I mentioned in my story, and I cite specific examples. And sometimes the quarterback just gets rid of the ball quick enough. And literally, even if he were to win his matchup, he can't do anything about it. And that's how you neutralize a good pass rusher, is you get rid of the ball quickly because you don't give them time to affect the quarterback. Regardless, the Packers need to find ways to get Gary in more one-on-one matchups and get him at the quarterback, whether that's running stunts and twists, whether that's putting him over the center, whether it's, getting more out of Preston Smith, who has 4 sacks in the last 4 games, which is tied for 4th in the league over that span. That's no coincidence because Gary's getting attention. Whether it's, relying on Smith to keep up that production, so you hope more attention goes his way. So maybe you free up some one-on-ones for Gary. Whatever it is, Joe Barry, Jason Rebrovich, the outside linebackers coach, I think his title is pass rush specialist now, and Matt LaFleur need to find ways to get their best defensive player, I would say, and maybe the best player on the team to be more productive.
Yeah, and I wonder about some of the other guys on the defense as well. I mean, the question that I think a lot of fans have had since he signed the contract after going first team All-Pro a couple of years ago is Devondre Campbell. Is he a one-year wonder or is he a guy? Is he, a stud? And I don't know that we've, answered that question yet. I don't know that he's answered that question yet. You wonder about, is Kenny Clark going to return to the form that he had a couple of seasons ago as well? Is he going to be the stud that he's being paid to be? Again, more questions than answers on this defense. And with the porous run defenses we've talked about a million times, you want to start to see those guys that they've invested heavily in, both with, draft capital and financial capital. You need to see the production, because if you can't stop the run, you're not going to win very many football games, no matter how good your offense is. And this is an offense that's been struggling.
Without a doubt. And the lack of complementary football in general terms has not helped the Packers at all, because we see their defense finally stop the run. And granted, they beat the Rams. That has proven to be an outlier.
Yeah. Well, and then Pittsburgh.
Right.
And they didn't.
The complementary football last Sunday was not good enough. Their offense finally started to move the ball, get some things going, got some chunk plays, and their defense couldn't stop the run. Granted, they allowed 23 points, which isn't terrible, but they allowed the Steelers to march down the field and get into field goal range a couple times. And, against the Raiders, the defense was great. They stopped the leading rusher last year better than a lot of teams have been able to in Josh Jacobs, but the offense was garbage. So the complementary football just hasn't been there. And special teams last Sunday, Josiah DeGuara freezing, Anders Carlson kicking the ball out of bounds. The Packers don't have a good enough team to be able to overcome these mistakes, whether it's run defense or, the special teams woes of last Sunday. They don't have an explosive enough offense to be able to win a shootout like they used to. So they really have to be buttoned up in all three phases. And right now they're just not, at the same time, at least.
I know this is a question that is certainly not necessarily a mid-November question, but maybe an early January question. But as we've reached the halfway point of the season, slightly past the halfway point of the season, who's playing for a 2024 job right now on this team the rest of the way, the final 8 games?
That's a good question. I think you look at the guys with expiring contracts, A.J. Dillon, John Runyon Jr., Josiah DeGuara.
He's got to, listen.
I don't see any of those guys being on the team next year.
It's going to be tough. I think it's going to be difficult, especially, Dillon has shown flashes, had the nice 40-yard run on Sunday against the Steelers, but if you take that run out, he averaged I think about 3.5 yards per carry the rest of the way, which isn't terrible, but you're trying to figure out what your offensive backfield is going to look like next year. Josiah DeGuara, there's part of me that was surprised he made the team this time around. But I get it. He was on special teams, good special teamer, but again, he wound up, helping the Packers lose a game this past Sunday when he, like you said, he just froze on the extra point. Can't do that. When you're a fringe player, and let's face it, Josiah DeGuara is a fringe player, and you can't compete on special teams. If you can't contribute on special teams, you're not going to be here very long.
Totally agree. And if he was a 6th or 7th round pick, we might not be having this discussion because he probably wouldn't be here, but general managers, understandably so, have egos. And that's the reason Amari Rodgers stuck around for as long as he did. It's the reason Jay Sternberger stuck around for as long as he did.
Because where are those guys now?
Right, exactly. They're out of the league, but they stuck around because they were 3rd-round picks. And DeGuara has been a decent gadget player over the years, but time's run its course. And on Dillon, he's not a feature back. He's a good number 2, but you can get a good number 2 for a lot cheaper than what the Packers would have to re-sign him for. So that's why I wonder if he'll be on the team next year. It'll be interesting to see how they handle these last 8 games, because if they lose another 1 or 2 or 3 in a row with the Chargers, Lions, and Chiefs coming up, do they give some more young guys opportunities? Do they give Emmanuel Wilson some of A.J. Dillon's snaps to see if he can handle RB2 duties? Do they give Isaiah McDuffie, Devondre Campbell snaps because they think McDuffie factors more into the long-term plans? Do they give Sean Ryan more of John Runyon Jr. snaps for that same reason if they're out of it? Tanking without tanking is how John Kuhn called it on our podcast earlier today. It's something to ponder.
Yeah, but I also, I wouldn't call it tanking when you're trying to figure out what your future is going to look like. And if you put some of those guys in there,
putting those guys in doesn't give you as good of a chance to win, is what I'm saying.
I don't even know that that's the case.
Fair.
With some of those guys, because they haven't been getting the job done. If they were so much better than what was coming up behind them, maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation about those specific players that we've been having that conversation about. I don't think it's unfair if you're out of it. And the Packers are 3-6. I don't think they're going to the playoffs this year. I don't think it's realistic.
What makes you say that?
Well, it's eyeball test. Looking at the schedule ahead. Well, they got Carolina coming up. They've got the Bears again, but they've also got some tough games coming up. I don't think they're going to the playoffs this year. So if they're mathematically eliminated with, 4 games left to play, which probably not likely with 4 games, but maybe with 3 games left to play, they could be completely out of it. Yeah, I want to see what 2024 is going to look like. I want to see guys that are competing hard for jobs for 2024. That's competition. And if you have to treat the last couple of games of the season like it's the preseason, I'm cool with that, because again, maybe it goes back to expectations. My expectations going into the season were so low, as everyone who listens to the show knows. But I also think that the future is bright. I do think that there's a plan here, and I believe in the plan. But sometimes when you believe in that plan, you've got to maybe press the play button a little bit before perhaps originally that was what you were going to do.
You're absolutely right. And that's something I'll be interested to get Wayne Larravee's thoughts on after the break when the voice of the Packers joins us, as he does every week on Tuesday in the second segment. We'll get to that after the break. Stick with us right here on the Matt Schneidman Show on the Game. Back here on the Matt Schneidman Show, Tuesday, November 14th, better known as Eileen Schneidman's birthday, my lovely mother. Happy birthday, Mom. She listens to a lot of shows. Maybe she's spending her birthday in a more productive way, not listening to my show. I would not blame her because we're about to talk to Wayne Larravee, though That would be a reason she listens, because she loves when I talk to Wayne. She has texted me multiple times while we're talking to Wayne that she loves it. So, as always, second segment on Tuesdays. Our conversation with Wayne Larrivee is sponsored by Coal Investment Group, the retirement specialist, and Pella Windows and Doors of Wisconsin. Wayne, Doug keeps thinking he wakes you up on these Tuesday evenings when we call you. I have stopped, I guess, reminding you that we do these Tuesdays. I know you do a bunch of different hits on this station, so I apologize if we catch you by surprise and interrupt something more important that you're doing.
No, no, and I don't go to bed that early. So
Hey, you could
listen,
take a nap.
I'm all down with the naps. Anytime I can get like a good 20 minutes or a good 30-minute nap in the middle of the day, I'm down, man.
yeah, but Doug, I'm not working as hard as you are,
All right.
so I don't need a nap.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Anyway, Wayne, that was I don't want to say ugly, but that's kind of been the norm when it comes to what we've seen watching Packer games this year, and Sundays wasn't much different. I'll say it was a more aesthetically pleasing game from an offensive perspective, but another ugly game from a run defense perspective. It just seems like the Packers are stuck in this purgatory of they can never stop the run, and when they do for a couple weeks, it just reverts back to, old time's sake, and that's not being able to tackle, not being able to get off blocks. What's the solution here? I think it goes from top down. Brian Gutekunst, who he drafts, how they coach, the players executing. Oh, what gives here?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to dispute any of that, Matt. I mean, at this point in the game, you start wondering about all of that, and I think they do too. I think there are discussions going on at 1265 Lombardi that they're probably having discussions very much like that, trying to figure out, okay, did we make the right pick on these players? Are they getting the right coaching? What's giving here? Because they've spent a lot of time and asset and money on a defense that we all believed would be better than this, and yet 3 times you give up over 200 yards rushing, and in the case of the Pittsburgh Steelers, although those 2 backs are very good, they've been struggling to run the football all season. So that was the disheartening part of that game. The other aspect that I really liked, I thought Jordan Love did take a step forward. I understand the final statistics because of the 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter. Don't relay that, but I thought through the first 3 quarters of that game, plus part of the fourth quarter, I thought he was very good and made some decisive throws. They connected with some throws downfield. And the best thing I liked about it, Matt, was you go back to the Atlanta game, second week of the season, and they get the ball. They have a chance to move into field goal range and win the game. What happened? 4 straight incompletions. And at least what we saw in Pittsburgh was not only once, but twice did he get the Packers to the doorstep in the fourth quarter. And the last drive I thought was very impressive. And it just came down to a matter of they had to try to make a play, and then the pass was intercepted. But with getting the ball 59 seconds ago, no timeouts, driving from his territory into Pittsburgh territory to the doorstep, I thought that was pretty impressive. I think this quarterback is showing growth. Is he the guy for the long term? Probably too early to make that decision, but at least we're seeing growth in him.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Sure, the first interception, namely, was not a good decision, as Matt LaFleur has come out and said. As we've all talked about, I don't think you blame him too much for the second one, because that's just a got to make something happen type of play. And the other team lines up with 7 guys on the goal line. It's near impossible to make a play happen. But despite that mistake on the first interception, when he threw it into, an undesirable coverage to throw into, if you may, the throws were there, the off-schedule plays. He made more big-time, accurate throws than he has this season to Jaden Reed, to Romeo Doubs, to Jaden Reed on that last drive, to Luke Musgrave down the seam on a similar play that he airmailed Musgrave on in week 3 against the Saints on what should have been a 61-yard touchdown. So I totally agree with you, Wayne. After that game, can we say he's the guy? No, of course not. But I think we've talked about progress and growth so much this season, and even if they lose, we want to see progress and growth, or I should say the Packers want to see that. And I think that's what we saw from Jordan. And if he can continue to build on that, not only will the Packers probably not have a good enough draft pick to be in position to take a quarterback, but I think Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur and Mark Murphy will be more comfortable with giving Jordan the keys to this offense for a second full year if he can continue to build on what he did Sunday against the Steelers.
Yeah, and again, we'll see. But certainly we're seeing some growth in this kid. He's a smart kid. I think he learns from his mistakes. We're just seeing a better quarterback than we saw the first part of the season. And again, I know he got off to a good start. Don't get me wrong, but he had some rough games there, 3 or 4 in a row, and now we're starting to see some progress. So that's something to build on. The thing that was disheartening, as we talked about at the top of this conversation, is the defense, and in particular the run defense. That was disheartening to see them get run over like that, over 200 yards of rushing by the Steelers. So I don't know what you do at this stage of the season to shore that up. You know what I mean? I don't think there's a magic bullet. I know these coaches have been trying different things with both offensively and defensively. By the time you get to November, you've tried a lot of different things to correct problems. And that's going to be something going forward they're going to have to take a good hard look at. And the answers aren't going to be easy.
Speaking of taking a long, hard look at things without easy answers, let's just say hypothetically, and Doug and I talked about this in the first segment, let's say hypothetically the Packers lose their next 3 games, which is possible because they play the Chargers, the Lions, and the Chiefs. 3 games they are going to be underdogs in. Now, anything can happen in the NFL, as we know, so I'm not saying it's impossible for them to win, but let's just say they lose all 3. They're 3-9, out of the playoff race, not mathematically, but realistically, as they are now. And one of those hard decisions is, do we give younger guys more playing time over veterans who aren't going to be here in the long term? And I know I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but 3, quote unquote switches that come to mind is Emmanuel Wilson for A.J. Dillon, or Sean Ryan for John Runyon Jr., or Isaiah McDuffie for Devondre Campbell. Young guys who might play important roles in the future in place of veterans who might not be here as soon as next year. Now, I did my podcast with John Kuhn earlier today, and he called it, tanking without tanking, just because you think, replacing those 3 players that I named doesn't give you as good of a chance to win. But at the same time, is there something to be said for seeing what you have in some of these young guys that maybe aren't playing starring roles now, but could be part of the future? Like, is that one of these tough decisions that might have to be made if they're completely out of it?
I think they've seen a lot of McDuffie. Wilson's a guy I think they want to get on the field more, and they're starting to in the last couple of weeks. That's something that I guess, Matt, when you're talking long-term roster building, that's part of it. That becomes part of it if the season gets to that stage. I hope it doesn't, but if it does, then you could see where that might happen. But some of the guys you mentioned, some of the positions you mentioned, due to injury, we've already seen some of these guys play a more prominent role. But I think you got Emmanuel Wilson's a guy you've got to get a longer look at, and if he's ready for more of a role, and I think that's going to happen regardless, and it's starting to happen right now.
We talked about Rashawn Gary in the first segment too, and I was throwing off some numbers about how much his production has dipped in the last month, and I wanted to preface that by saying I'm not saying he is mailing it in after his contract, but you look at guys like Max Crosby, he plays 98% of the defensive snaps for the Raiders, and TJ Watt, 84 for the Steelers, Myles Garrett, 81 for the Browns. Rashawn Gary, he was on a pitch count, obviously, the first 5 weeks, so we can understand why he never played more than half the defensive snaps, but the last 4 weeks, he's never played more than 68% of the defensive snaps. He's always been in the 60s. Is Rashawn Gary an elite edge rusher? And I know that may seem silly because he's paid, the 5th highest average annual salary, but he's playing more and he's producing significantly less. All those other guys probably face the same amount of attention in terms of double teams and chips, whatever that Gary does, and they consistently produce at an elite level. It's obviously, 3 games since he signed that contract. But how much more do you need to see from Gary to not only validate the contract, but give the Packers defense what it needs up front?
It's a perplexing issue that I thought about. Larry McCarron and I off the air have talked about it. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me that Rashawn Gary could have a stretch like he's just had over these last 3 games, and Kenny Clark can do very much the same thing. And, when you talk about elite in this league and the names you mentioned, those players bring it every single week. Now, by bring it, I mean they produce every single week. I think Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark bring it every week. Whatever they've got, they bring, and they deliver. But when you're talking elite, you're talking dominance on a weekly basis.
I agree. And it's just something we haven't seen from Gary. And, obviously he's been elite. I wouldn't say he didn't earn that contract extension because his pressure numbers are, really good over the past couple of years. But I think he just needs to be more consistent. All right, let's look ahead to this Sunday's matchup. I said earlier today that if the Packers win, I don't think Brandon Staley has a job by Monday. That defense has not been anywhere close to sufficient, especially given the fact that he's a defensive head coach. But I don't see the Packers winning. The Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen combo, especially if the Packers don't have Jair Alexander on the field, could absolutely crucify them. What do you see as the most difficult aspect of this Sunday's matchup for the Packers?
Well, again, hopefully they have Jair Alexander, and hopefully he's healthy and playing at a level we know he can play at, because you're going to need that. I think they're a lethal combination. Herbert is just deadly, especially on the deep ball. Allen is his go-to guy. With the loss of Williams, they don't have. They're trying to develop another complement in that receiving core, and they don't have a lot of proven deep threat commodities in that receiving core right now. They've got some young guys. Quentin Johnston is starting to scratch the surface a little bit, a rookie wide receiver out of TCU. But really, it's Keenan Allen, and that's got to be the focus. And I'm sure there'll be a double over him. There's no question in my mind about that. And that's the number one thing you have to flush out. But I just got done today watching the Lions and the Chargers go at it. And my gosh, you talk about two elite offensive teams. And that's what they were that day. And they were really, both of them were really just great and at a different level. The thing about the Chargers, they played the Jets a week ago. I believe it was a Monday night game, flew back home, played the Lions, and now they're going to have to fly to Green Bay to play the Packers. So you don't know if the travel will get to them or whatever, but the Chargers are talented, top-end talent. They're lacking a little bit in the secondary on the corners. And that's where they get into a little bit of trouble. If those pass rushers don't get home, Bosa and Khalil Mack, they've got issues. But, they have not performed defensively the way I know they thought they would.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Bosa and Khalil Mack are one of the best pass rush duos in the NFL. The Packers just faced another one of them in TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. I mean, I remember earlier this season when Khalil Mack had 6 sacks in one game against the Raiders. He is a game record. Joey Bosa is a game record. There's a reason both those guys are among the 6, 7 highest paid pass rushers in the NFL. So it'll be another tough test for Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom. Matt LaFleur seemed pleased with how the offensive line played against the Steelers. I thought for the most part they were solid considering the task at hand, but another tough task ahead. Wayne, we thank you as always. We'll let you go back to bed. And hopefully the Yankees trade for Juan Soto.
Hey, I'm wearing my Yankees cap right now.
Oh,
man.
okay.
It's all for you. It's all about you.
I appreciate that. That's what my mother tells me too. It's all about me.
All right.
Even though I know
we're
it's
all
not.
in it for you, man. We're rooting hard for you.
Thanks, Wayne. I appreciate it. That makes one of us.
We're hoping you pan out.
Yeah. Hopefully one day.
All right. Have a good one. We'll
You
talk
too.
to you soon.
As always, our conversations with Wayne have been sponsored by Coal Investment Group, the retirement specialists, and Pella Windows and Doors of Wisconsin. I would say, Doug, that these last two teams the Packers are facing probably have the two best edge rusher duos in the NFL. I mean, you can make a case for maybe Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith. But the Steelers and the Chargers, they're right up there. And that comes after you had to prepare for Aaron Donald. So no rest for the weary here in Green Bay, and a lot of sleepless nights for Luke Butkus, Adam Stenavich, and Matt LaFleur.
That's why they get the big bucks, right?
I guess so.
I mean, it's as the late Ted Thompson used to say famously, it's big boy football. And I know that they knew that they were coming up on the schedule, and I know they had some injuries on the offensive line. I get it, but you know what? You still got to protect Jordan Love. You got to give him a chance. And I thought Jordan Love, as we talked about earlier in the week, I thought he performed pretty well on Sunday. Now, you know, you got to. Now I'm going to go Mike McCarthy on you. You've heard it before. Stack successes.
Got to. We're going to keep stacking successes, or I don't know if you'd call this show a success. I guess it is since we're still on the air. After this break, we're going to try and stack a third consecutive successful segment, if you consider the first two successful. So stay with us right here on The Game with the Matt Schneidman Show. Holiday shopping just got a whole lot easier. Now through November 28th, when you buy $50 or more, use promo code CYBER30 to get 30% off the entire Iron Jock collection. 30% off of quarter zips, hoodies, jackets, polos, men's, women's, everything. Give the gift of Iron Jock this holiday season. Go to ironjock.com. That's ironjoc.com. Now, speaking of gifts, I saw every show on this station before mine today, I guess aside from Zabe's show this morning, was broadcasting from Shields in Appleton at a Toys for Tots event. There were a couple Packers who appeared on the program, Aaron Jones, Carl Brooks, Dontavion Wicks. Just a nice event. Head over to the 97.3 The Game Instagram and Twitter channels where our guy Hunter Baumgart has posted a bunch of clips. Good event for the holiday season, and give a listen to what some of those players said. I was planning on heading down there to, get some clips of the guys, maybe appear on some of the shows, but that film study of Rashawn Gary, I guess, probably wasn't more important. But when I'm trying to service the loyal subscribers of The Athletic, everything else takes a back seat.
You had to do a deep dive. And sometimes, hey, you know what I did today all day long? I put together the open for Packers game day, which shouldn't take, it's a 7-minute segment that shouldn't take 6 hours to do. And yet here we are.
How does that take 6 hours?
There's just a lot of work that goes into it. It's a lot of audio production. There's some effort that goes into it. It's like Tales from 1265. People have asked, and I'm grateful for people asking, hey, when's that Wayne Larrivee thing going to come out? Soon. Working on it. We're getting there. But there's production elements that go into it.
And that's an ignorant question of me to ask, because since I thankfully do not have to deal with splicing and putting together and manufacturing. I guess I manufacture audio since I record it, but like when I have a clip from a press conference I want to include in this show, I just send it to Doug and he does the rest. So I appreciate that.
Certainly.
So it's a dumb question for me to ask why, because you're the guy who knows it. But yeah, tune in Sunday morning for Packers game day.
Starting
Another
at 8
noon
a.m.
game. 8 a.m.?
8 a.m.
Another noon game, which I love.
Well, that makes one of you.
I love noon games because you wake up, you go right to the stadium, you're not dilly-dallying around all day, and you get home with some day left. Not daylight, but you get home with some day left.
Yeah, you do. What time do you get up on a noon kickoff game day?
I'll roll out of bed around, 9. I like to get over to the stadium, 2 hours early. You don't live 5 minutes from the stadium, so it's different for you.
Correct. I'm also on the air 4 hours before kickoff. So I get there 5 hours before kickoff, which means I leave 7 hours before kickoff, which means I get up 8 hours before kickoff. That's why I don't love noon kickoffs.
I'm sorry. I'm being very insensitive during this last segment.
It's all right. It's just part of the, listen, I knew what I was getting myself into. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been with the Packers radio network off and on since 1996. I get it. I understand. I'm in it. I live it. I love it. Let's do this.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
That's why you've kept a job, because you're a hard worker. I think the Badgers are getting destroyed by Providence right now.
They are on, they're right now on 97.3 The Game, our Milwaukee flagship. We are on the rest of the Game radio network. So we're on WNFL.
Oh my God, they're down by 20 points.
Yeah, they're not having a great game. They're not playing so well. They played well against Tennessee. They still lost against Tennessee. They still lost by 10 points against Tennessee, but Tennessee's a much better team than Wisconsin is this year. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how good of a squad they've got this year. It's a deeper team. I don't know if it's a better team than we've seen in recent years. So we'll see.
I just did a check-in on the team I root for, Syracuse. Down by 16 to Colgate in the first half at Syracuse.
It's not great, Bob.
Not great. I really wanted them to win tonight so they could be 3-0 going into the Maui Invitational next week against Tennessee, who Wisconsin obviously already lost to. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. So Syracuse is going to stink for another year, it looks like. I can't get away from teams that stink. Syracuse basketball, the Yankees, the Packers. Maybe I just stink. Hopefully what doesn't stink is my attempt at another field goal tomorrow. I will be attempting probably various distances. That's a hard word to say. Not really. Wes Hodkiewicz has agreed to hold for me again. Hopefully the weather isn't too thundery or blistery or windy, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to try and go back to 40 yards. I had a couple yards to spare without a full power kick from 33. I think we're going to get a real ball, not that the ball we used last time was illegitimate.
Yeah,
But if
Wes
I-
got one from the pile. Wes got one from, we walked over to the equipment room.
Yes. Now, if I can make a 40-yarder, you will not hear the end of it from me. I can guarantee you that. Now, I can't guarantee I'll make a 40-yarder, but if I do, you will not hear the end of it.
Okay. Now, I enjoyed your back and forth with Rich Bisaccia last week. So is he going to hear the end of it? Or are you just going to keep bugging him for a tryout?
No, they have a saying that as a reporter, it's not supposed to be about you. I'm probably not following that rule by doing this in the first place, but I'll make it about me on my channels, on my show, on my Twitter, on my Instagram. But in a press conference, I don't know. If he gets word of it, sure, I'll engage like last time when he started it. I'm not going to bring it up myself,
Okay.
is what I'm saying.
All right. That's fair. I mean, as a reporter, you can't make it about you, but as a new talk show host, I mean, that's what a talk show is. It is all about you.
That's why I got a radio show, so I can talk about myself, so I
Right.
can look at my own name every day. Why do you think I'm doing this, Doug?
Right. It's if you look on the screen, if you're watching it on the stream, I mean, your name's pretty big.
Yeah, I'm not doing it for the paycheck. I'm doing it to boost my ego. That's pretty much what I'm doing it
Yeah,
for.
I get it.
What else we got coming up this week? I know you got the Tales from 1265. We got another football feast. I think at this point, and maybe I'm underestimating the passion of Packer fans, but I would imagine, or I should say, I wouldn't blame them if they have fatigue with, looking back on games, game previews, because to an extent, it's just like this season's not going anywhere realistically, most likely. What's the point of really diving into the X's and O's of a matchup that, if history repeats itself, and I mean recent history, will probably just go like the rest of the Packers games this year? If I was a betting man, which I am, but not on the NFL, I would imagine the Chargers get out to an early 2-score lead. The Packers make it somewhat interesting in the second half, but they ultimately fall short. And we say the defense was leaky. We say the offense couldn't generate enough explosive plays until the Chargers started playing soft coverage to protect a big lead and make sure nothing got over the top. But what you tell us, fans, on the talking text line. I know we only got 5 minutes left in the show, but we'd love to hear from you whenever. 414-799-1973 on the PelletWI.com talking text line. What do you want us to talk about if the Packers keep losing? And I mean that sincerely. And I'm not saying that because there will be a shortage of stuff to talk about. I'm not saying that because I'm lazy. I am in some areas of life. But, just rehashing the same stuff from every game might not be interesting to y'all. Previewing the games traditionally, as we normally do, might not be interesting because there's more to, look for than just how's Austin Eckler going to kill the Packers in the screen game, or how's Justin Herbert going to beat Valentine with a deep ball, if he does. The answer is more mock draft talk, but we've done some of that, and you can only talk about that so much. So you guys let us know, guys and girls, men and women, you let us know what you would like us to talk about.
And that's one of the reasons that I brought up what 2024 looks like in the first segment of the show tonight. It's because I don't know that we're fully there yet, but I think we're going to get there sooner rather than later. And I listen, as I said on Monday's show, I really liked what I saw in a lot of areas in Sunday's game against the Steelers. I saw progress. Now, it didn't translate on the scoreboard, obviously. The run defense was still pretty bad against Pittsburgh. But, TJ Watt got 1 sack. I thought he was contained as well as you can contain one of the best pass rushers in recent NFL history, if not NFL history overall. We saw the graphic, Reggie White, TJ Watt, JJ Watt through the first 100 games of their careers. I thought that was pretty cool. And then, JJ talked about it on the CBS broadcast. But 2024 to me is where this team can take a step. 2024 is where you're going to not have as much dead cap money. It's where you can go out if there are places, not that Brian Gutekunst is ever going to break the bank for a free agent that isn't his own, but you will have at least some flexibility to do something if there's a player that can help you in a specific area. I think I couched that enough. I hope I couched that enough because I know that he's not going to go out and spend stupid. It's not in the Packers' DNA. It's not in his DNA. He comes from the Ted Thompson tree. It's not in the, Ted never did that, obviously. So I don't expect Brian Gutekunst to do that, which, but you will have at least a little bit of flexibility. Whereas this year they didn't have any. That's, I've said it 100 times when I was asked, and I'm sure you were asked probably a million times more than I was, are the Packers going to go out and get a veteran wide receiver? Well, first of all, there really wasn't anybody that was out there on the market. I don't think that would have significantly helped this team. The other thing is they didn't have any money to spend. That's why they needed so many draft picks, because they needed cheap labor because they've got all this dead cap money with all the veterans that are now playing for the Jets.
Randall Cobb is a healthy scratch. But it goes back to something we've talked about a million times on this show. Let me ask you this, Doug. If Brian Gutekunst knew this is how his wide receiver core would be, if he knew it would be this much of a struggle, do you think he would have, obviously hindsight's 2020, do you think he would have gone out and got a veteran, or would he have said, hopefully, not knowing how the other parts of the team would perform, would he have said, hopefully the running game's better than it's been, hopefully the defense is more consistent than it's been, because we need those developmental snaps for these guys? The main reason was because he didn't want to take away these valuable experience. He didn't want to take away this valuable experience, these valuable developmental snaps from the receivers. So part of me thinks he would have just let it fly how it is.
Maybe. I think it's an interesting question that I don't know that you'll ever get an honest answer from him. Maybe you will. I don't know, because when he's been asked about it, I mean, the plan was to let these guys all grow together. I think that everyone was expecting, as we've been talking about for the last several weeks, Christian Watson to take the step that he hasn't taken. But you're seeing guys like Jaden Reed really, as a rookie, turn into a pretty decent wide receiver. You're seeing guys like Romeo Doubs, who's having, some more consistency come his way. He started out well in his rookie season, kind of faded a little bit, but I think you're seeing a little bit more consistency from him. You're starting to see, the twos and the threes at that position, the second and third option, really start to look like, okay, these are decent second and third options. You just need that number one guy to start acting like and playing like a number one guy, and it just hasn't happened yet. That's what I think he was counting on. Now, you go into 2024, and I know he's a second-round draft choice. You really, if you're not going to see it by the end of this season, you really need to see it next year.
Right, and you brought up a couple intriguing names that I'll be watching the rest of the season with regards to how they developed. Dontavion Wicks, Jaden Reed.
Yeah.
They've shown some nice things.
Yeah,
now, John Kuhn and I had a discussion on our podcast, Brick and the Stick. I believe it's out on the iHeart app and Spotify right now. Some good discussion today, but those two guys have been impressive. At the same time, it doesn't seem like the Packers have a true number one receiver on the team. Do they need to have one? Is it okay if they have a couple number twos and threes?
This year, yes. Next year, no.
Right. If they're in position to draft a Marvin Harrison Jr., do they do it? Absolutely.
Of course.
I'll answer that one for you. But I'll be interested to see how guys like Reed and Wicks develop. If Watson can get off the schneid, pun intended. If Dobbs can get more targets. Romeo Dobbs the best receiver on this team, I think.
I agree. Right now he is.
They just don't throw him the ball.
Yeah, he's the best wide receiver they've got, but that wasn't the plan for him to be the best wide receiver that they've got. But that's where we're at. That's where we live right now.
I know. Anyway, we'll be back at it right here on The Game tomorrow with some more news and notes from Lambeau after tomorrow's availability. We get defensive position coaches this week. We'll have a couple of them tomorrow. So we'll have more stuff for you guys to chew on. We appreciate you listening, as always. For Doug, I'm Matt. This has been the Matt Schneidman Show on The Game.
Going down.